Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Resilient Lawyer podcast. I am Mareike, and I'm with my co-host and co-founder of PMRI, Advocate Sonia Cillier. Hi, Sonia.
America.
And today we're talking about an important topic, and we have a great guest with us today, Barry Greyvenstein. Welcome to the Resilient Lawyer podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mareike and Sonia. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much for your time. Today, we're going to talk about an interesting topic, as I said, but let me first introduce Barry. He's a mediator and co-founder of the Mediation Academy. And we will be talking about the future of South African family law and how mediation fits into the new legal landscape. But before we get into the topic, you are the co-founder of the Mediation Academy. So please tell us more about that. What training that you guys, do and how you got into this space.
Certainly. Thank you. So my story really begins when I started mediating, which is many years ago, and I found myself working in a corporate job. Believe it or not, in a previous life, I was creating business processes.
Oh.
And it was interesting, but I was always lacking something. The people were great, money was okay, but I wasn't fulfilled. And then somebody told me about mediation, and everything just snapped into place. I immediately recognized this is a superior tool to litigation, and I'd try to avoid law as long as possible. Both of my parents come from law, and I always thought that I would never go into it. And then life catches up to you.
Oh, wow.
So, as soon as I heard about mediation, it really just made sense to me, because in my early 20s, I had worked at a law firm, and we'd won this one particular case. This, custody of this little girl, this little 4-year-old girl, and our side won a very decisive victory, very successful law firm. And I had joined the SAPS in driving to this little girl's house and collecting her from the grandma so that we could take her to her father. And it was bumpy. It was a rough thing to go through. And so that same day, when I got back at the office, I actually handed in my resignation, and I said, that's it. Family law is for the birds. I'm never going to work in this industry. And I saw the damage that even when you're winning, even when you're giving your client everything that the client wants, you might destroy a whole bunch of delicate relationships surrounding this case. And so everything snapped into place for me. I studied mediation. I took some time off work and I got into it. And then years later, I thought to myself, sure, but it's been so difficult getting started up. Perhaps I can create training that's a little bit easier to understand. And so what we did was we created the Mediation Academy. It's essentially based on online video training, where people can, instead of taking a week or 2 or 3 off work, you can actually just study in the evenings. And most of us, we're all professionals. We can't just take 2 weeks off work. And so really the idea was born out of how can we, how can we give mediation as big a footprint as possible? And so the company is 8 years old today. We've trained just south of 600 mediators. It is an absolute pleasure and privilege to be in this industry.
Sure. Interesting journey. And but you still have a passion for family law, right? Or family mediation.
Absolutely. So family law fits into a much bigger picture. Now, if you're watching this podcast, you're probably in South Africa. You've probably got some interest in the law. maybe family law. But I think there's a reason why you're watching this podcast. Um, Now, family law, or rather, I think let me approach it from another way. If we don't really, as South Africans, we don't really like spending a lot of time talking about the things that are going wrong in South Africa. We try to kind of skirt around it.
Mm.
But at the back of everybody's mind, there is this very clear idea that things are not as they should be. And
Yes.
at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of people disconnected from their own purpose. So let's take a look at. Um, I want to give you a kind of a factoid, a fun factoid
Mm.
that stood out for me. So, what is the single largest predictor, the most accurate predictor for children going into a life of crime, teenage pregnancy, drug and alcohol abuse, unemployment? Can you guess?
Divorce.
Yes, yes. Growing up without a father. Isn't that strange? It starts
Sure.
in the family. And so if we're looking at these macro social questions as a country, why is crime so high? Why is unemployment so high? It's easy to lay the problem at the feet of government,
Mm.
but maybe it's indicative of a much bigger problem. Maybe there's a crisis in families. Maybe there's a crisis in individuals. And so mediation is a way for us to connect one case at a time, one family at a time, to connect and repair
Yes.
this very delicate structure.
Mm.
So for me, at least, it comes down to a question of purpose. In my previous job, um, creating these business
Mm.
processes, I was lacking meaning. And so I think there's a reason why I'm here right now, why the viewers at home are watching this podcast. There's a reason why you're in South Africa right now. You could be anywhere in the world. Even if it feels like you don't have options, you have options.
Yes.
Maybe we're all here to fix the country.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, I don't think people always know about different options. I mean, having gone through a divorce myself, I know it's the two parties fighting against each other, and maybe have I known of mediation, things could have been different today, which it's not. Um, yeah, I think it plays a very big role. I don't know. Yeah, I think it makes a difference in the outcome at the end of the day. Yeah,
Yes,
because that's yeah, so yeah.
Absolutely.
now, and very much aware of this, but practitioners are often not very comfortable with mediation because there's a certain litigation process. Now, I've always said that family law matters do not belong in a courtroom. It should never, ever be in a courtroom. It's not a dispute that should be resolved in a court. It should not be litigious. But that is not the general feel of so many of the practitioners out there. So how do your clients actually get to you? Is it through referrals through the attorneys, or do you have direct walk-ins without going through the attorney process? I'm just interested, how do they get to you?
Certainly. That's a great question. So the answer is all of the above. Right now, we're seeing we're really seeing a flourishing of mediation. It's gone from being very unknown to being somewhat known, up to the point where we're seeing a lot of legislation, a lot of structures, a lot of very talented people all pulling in the same direction to make mediation mainstream. So for any mediator, these relationships are critical. And you have to, as a mediator, you have to connect with like-minded law firms. That's just the reality of being a mediator. So, and many law firms recognize that there is something missing from the litigation process. It's not just about processes and protocols. It's not just about money and assets. It's about relationships. Even dare I say, generational trauma. Mareike, even me, I also, I mean, I haven't been divorced, but I did grow up like literally most South African kids. I grew up in a house where my father and mother divorced. And so this is very much a reality for South Africa. And if we get the right mediator, if we put the right person with the right training at the right time in a case, they are able to interrupt the cycle of generational trauma. And what this does is it lets everybody in the family, it gets them a second bite at the cherry.
Mm. And in your training, just, as for interest, do you include then for some skills for the mediators, with dealing with this trauma? Because I mean, I think that's kind of a missing piece, sometimes is how do I work with that human element? Because you're working with a client, and like you said, it's not just about the money and the assets and whatever. There's much more to it, and there's a lot of emotions involved, and it's a person's life falling apart in that moment, what kind of skills, is taught in terms of dealing with that? Because they're not a psychologist, however, that person is sitting in front of you. How do you deal with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, in short, we do equip them with some tools, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the mediator's own capabilities.
Yeah.
Now, some mediators do come from a mental health background or from a child psychology or developmental psychology or family dynamics. And certainly they have these tools. But the mediation room is not really the right place because we're not going to spend nearly enough time with the parties to really get to the root of the problem. However, what the mediator can and must do is to firstly get both parties around the table, and we'll teach you how to do that. And essentially, the mediator is going to create a kind of space where we can get both sides in the same room and press pause on the everyday momentum of life. And what happens if we do this in a skilled way is very special because we are able to isolate the people from the problem. We're able to directly address these negative emotions that are causing so much trouble, and causing this fight to rage on. We're able to fully connect with our clients, and then work through that initial anger and frustration. And then we speak to the best versions of these parents. And I have yet to find a single parent that does not care for their children at all. Every single parent I've ever met at some level, regardless of whether they're an alcoholic or whether they're violent or everybody loves their kids. And when we can get the parents to focus on being parents, they work together and we create something new. So in short, the mediator is not going to be specifically the right person to sort out all of these personal traumas in the family, but the mediator is going to stop the situation, intercept the damage that's being done, and then help the families to reassess which direction they want to go in. We're going to help them explore all of these different directions. And I actually give my clients a lot of information to work through, and I connect them with mental health professionals, because quite often we do need other people's help to heal from these wounds.
Absolutely. I think it is so important because you're working with people and the kids. It's more about the children at the end of the day, and to suit up to have the two parties fight it out in court. Yeah, it doesn't have very good consequences at the end of the day. So I think what you're doing is very, very, very important. And as you said, so is the landscape changing? Because we're talking about, how this fits into the new landscape, of the legal fraternity. So you can see a definite shift in terms of where mediation started and where you are today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I started out, almost nobody knew about mediation. It was very interesting starting my own practice. That was such a shock, going from a salary to starting up a practice. Um, a lot of lessons along the way. And where we are right now is we're on the verge of mediation going mainstream. Of course, with the Family Dispute Resolution Bill, um, which we hope is going to be tabled before Parliament shortly. I believe at the moment it's before the DG. And so, in essence, what the Family Dispute Resolution Bill is going to create is you can kind of see it as an extension of Rule 41A, in the sense that before you get a trial date for any family law case, you will first need to mediate. Um, and what this is going to do is this is going to really address the issue with backlogs at the courts. And yeah, and then so most of these cases, when this legislation is enacted, is going to be mediated. Of course, there will always be a very good place for litigation. Not all cases are suitable for mediation. And so large chunks of this new legislation, it is available, by the way. If you check it out on the internet, you can actually read through it. Large chunks of this legislation is copied from a number of countries that have already implemented it very successfully. So I'm feeling very positive about this. We are not reinventing the wheel. We're looking at what has worked in other countries. We're bringing it back home. And I really do think that it is a step in the right direction, because of the ultimate impact that such legislation is going to have on the individual, on families, and as well as broader society.
I would like to ask you, now that this will change, I mean, with mediation, you always have two willing parties that want to mediate. So that's your starting point, and that's what distinguishes mediation from so many of the other processes. Is that most of the time, both parties wants to be in the mediation and they want to resolve the dispute. But the moment this is now a part of legislation, you are going to have a large amount of people that don't want to mediate. They want to litigate. Um, I'm mad at him. I'm going to take him to the cleaners. So I suppose the mediator is now going to have to first address the unwillingness before they're going to be able to go into the mediation.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a fantastic point. And you're completely right. The voluntary nature of mediation is one of the pillars of mediation. So what is a mediation session going to look like without this pillar? Is there even going to be a mediation session? So at the end of the day, it comes down to what the parties want. And a skilled mediator will show the parties the options available to them. And of course, a big part of that is just getting them around the table, right? So getting both of the clients around the table is probably half of all the success. Half of the work is done just by getting these people there. And so what we teach our students, I mean, I'll give you a little example of one of the techniques that we use, is when a client calls me or a client contacts me. We have a little telephonic interview, and then I would reach out to the other side. But I'm not going to call the other side and tell them I've received an instruction from so and so to engage in mediation. The guy's going to put the phone down right there. Rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very honest with both of my clients, and I'm going to tell each of them separately and individually. I'm going to tell them that I'm a mediator. I haven't decided whether I want to mediate this case just yet. So what I want to do is I want to hear your side of the story. Who doesn't want to tell their side of the story? We all do.
Yes,
And
that's smart.
so that's it. So I mean, the first meeting on both sides, we don't charge them any money. At least I don't. I go meet them in a coffee shop, have a cappuccino and a chat. And I wanna hear your side of the story, because I really have not decided yet whether I want to take on this case. And sometimes you don't want to take on the case.
Mm.
So the good news is that a lot of this has already been figured out.
Mm.
So, I mean, it's still a choice. And I'm a firm supporter of choice. If you do want to litigate, that's up to you.
Mm. Mm.
Yes, do you have any idea what will be the expectation from the court side then? Would it just be a mediation report that it would be unsuccessful and then they can proceed to a trial date? Do you know how, are you guys in the loop yet on what would the procedure be then if it is a failed mediation or if the parties just don't want to mediate?
Right, right. So the parties will need to provide reasons to the court. And the court's going to evaluate whether those reasons are good or not. I believe that there are very good reasons why one should not choose to mediate. So the courts are going to hear this, and I'm sure that over time the courts are going to test what are the good reasons and what are the not so good reasons.
Mm. Mm. That makes sense. Yes. So just quickly, in terms of, the training that you provide, is it for mediators only? Is it lawyers that also, like Sonia, she's an advocate. I'm not, in the law space at all. I am in neurocoaching and so forth. So is lawyers also, can they be equipped, as being the mediator, playing both roles, or is it advisable that it is a different person that mediates the process?
Absolutely. So around a third of our graduates are, in fact, attorneys and advocates.
Mm.
And there is a growing number of people in the legal fraternity who feel inside of them that something is wrong with litigation, and they're interested in mediating. And dare I say that most of the people in this industry are literally in mediation because they feel a calling to mediate. So,
Mm.
of course, your background as an attorney is going to be very valuable. Also, if you come from a background outside of law, for instance, if you're a psychologist or a social worker,
Mm.
or maybe even a couples counselor, or a life coach, then you've got a unique set of skills, and those skills can be very useful when families split up.
Mm.
So we're lucky in the sense that it actually it takes a lot of different talent from a lot of different backgrounds to really provide to the market what the market needs.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. Okay, so it's not necessarily, that it has to be a lawyer that, does the mediation. It can be also, like you said, a social worker, psychologist that can they then enroll in your training as well as a mediator?
Yes, absolutely. So what is required is that the person that enrolls has a 3-year tertiary qualification.
Mm-hmm.
The industry is not very prescriptive about what the qualification should be in, but
Okay.
typically we'll see, exactly as you said, social workers, psychologists, attorneys, advocates. Sometimes also people who work at court.
Mm.
So everybody really brings, something new to the industry.
Yes, yes. And how long is this training?
In total, the training is 80 hours.
Mm.
80 hours translates to 2 weeks of in-class training.
Okay.
Most people complete these 80 hours over about 2 or 3 months. And so if you can find an hour in your day, you can study, you can do it.
Great.
We well, the way that we approach it is somewhat different from other companies.
Mm.
We've actually combined all of the components of the NABFAM standards on training components. We've actually taken all of those components, put it into a single course, and this is part of what makes our offering so unique. But yeah, I mean, I think I think what uh, I think part of the reason, I think probably the biggest part of why people train with us is because it resonates with their own purpose.
Mm.
So our purpose, our stated on our on our website, on our mission statement, is quite literally 2 parts: to intercept the cycle of generational trauma. And number 2, we achieve this by helping mediators to establish successful SMEs.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if that speaks to you, check out our website, www.mediationacademy.co.za. Yeah, and exciting times for the industry.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Barry. I really resonate with this. I mean, my coaching practice is also called life purpose coaching. I'm all about, living your purpose, doing what, makes you feel fulfilled and passionate. And I love that everything that you do is around that. It should be a calling, it's a purpose, there's a bigger purpose besides your own fulfillment, like you said. The bigger picture is, if you stop that generational trauma, then we are also actually solving a bigger problem, in the country, in terms of, like you said, drug abuse and all of those type of things. So I think it's amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. We really enjoyed the discussion. It's lovely to see people, that's really making a huge difference, in this landscape, as well. And anyone that's listening that would like to enroll, in the courses, Barry, you've given the website. It's www.mediationacademy.co.za or com.
.co.za. That's it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And then thank you also for everybody that was watching today and it's listening on Spotify. Remember to follow our channel as well to always see what guests we are talking to. And then we'll see you again